You are listening to Season 2 of the Humans of AI Stories Not Stats podcast, where Devi Parikh and Dhruv Batra talk to AI researchers to try and understand who they are as people, what their life is like, what they think about, what they're insecure about, what they get excited about. Questions that reveal the stories of their day-to-day lives. In this episode, Dhruv talks with Sasha Rush, who is an associate professor at Cornell Tech and a researcher at Hugging Face. Sasha talks about enjoying learning Spanish, taking ferries to work, the importance of nurturing relationships alongside a career, his love for writing and language, and lots more. For more information on the podcast and episodes, check out the Humans of AI website linked in the description. And with that, let's jump right to the episode.
Hey, how's it going?
That's good. How are you?
Good. Just getting used to the getting adjusted to the beginning of the end. Hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, almost there. Trying to knock on wood.
Yeah, I'm actually traveling to. I'm finally traveling after like a year or so. I'm traveling to New York soon.
Oh, cool.
My sister lives there, so I'll finally get to see her.
That's awesome. Where do you live these days?
I'm in California.
In California. Go.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can get started. So, Sasha Rush, thank you for doing this. Thank you for agreeing to participate in Humans of AI.
Sure.
I have a sequence of questions for you. Some are lightweight and may not require much thought. Others may require a bit more consideration, in which case, feel free to pause and take your time to think. We can skip questions if you'd like, but when in doubt, if you can err on the side of being open, vulnerable, transparent, we'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Sound good?
Yeah.
So what were you doing right before this call?
Well, right before this call, interminable meetings, but I did make lunch today, so that was fun. What did I make? I made some lentils with goat cheese, which was really nice. I guess one nice pandemic feature is being able to take some time to make lunch during the day.
Yeah, that sounds yummy.
Yeah, it was really good.
What is your daily routine like?
So in the morning, I always go for a walk to get coffee. We have a great coffee spot down the street, and we always go and I get an Americano with oat milk and walk back. So I'm one of my few hobbies is that I'm trying to learn Spanish very slowly. So I listen to the news in Spanish, which is about the level I can understand. I really want to get to more interesting podcasts, but at the moment it's just the news. So then I come home. My group normally does a stand-up meeting in the morning. So around 10 o'clock, we do a half-hour meeting. We go around and everyone kind of says what they're working on. We all talk about things. Depending on the day, I then either have a bunch more meetings, or if I try to keep one day or so a week that I can work on my own projects. If I'm doing that, I kind of lower my standing desk and code on some things. If I'm lucky, I'll have some time to make lunch or grab lunch at work. And then the afternoon, either I guess I'll work until the early evening. If it's in the winter, I like to go for a run before it gets too dark. Otherwise, I stick around and through that. And then I don't have kids or anything, so in the evening, cook, hang out with my partner, read a book, sort of thing. Yeah.
Interesting. The Spanish podcast and the Spanish news sounds particularly interesting. Do you listen to contemporary American news, or are you listening to news from another countries? Like the American news would allow you to ground it into events that presumably you're already aware of.
Yeah, that's true. So I normally listen to the Telemundo afternoon news podcast. So they kind of stream their television news. It tends to be American news, but with a kind of Latin American focus. So they'll cover American stories, but if there's a hurricane, or if there's an election, or if there's even just kind of fun event, or they'll often do like human interest stories like dance troupe in Mexico or something. So it's kind of fun as well.
Fascinating. What's the favorite part of your day?
The favorite part of my day. Yeah, so I definitely need the morning walk. That's like I think a staple. My favorite part of the day is I don't know, like probably the last couple of hours when you're kind of finishing up work or getting to go outside. I used to have a really nice commute. I would actually take the ferry to work, which was great. So I used to love that kind of decompression part. And some days you kind of have a project you're focusing on and it's on your mind. Other days you can kind of, I don't know, zone out or just kind of, yeah, take it all in.
The ferry sounds interesting. How long was the ride?
Yeah, so I worked at Cornell Tech, which is this kind of interesting campus. It's on the middle of the East River in Manhattan. So I live in Queens, which is right across the river from Manhattan, and my work is right in between. And so you can kind of take a ferry that goes kind of from my apartment to the island. And yeah, you can take it all year round. It was really fun. I mean, it's pretty cold in the winter. You have to kind of run to campus, but even when it's cold, it's kind of nice to get on the water and be out there. Yeah, I'm always amazed that the ferry drivers are able to kind of dock the boat so well. They kind of do this like crazy turn where they kind of go around in a circle in order to get into the ferry dock. Which is fun. Yeah.
Interesting. And what's the least favorite part of your day?
Yeah, I think that being a professor, obviously there are amazing parts to it, but sometimes I just find the meeting part overwhelming, or I'm like definitely a person who likes to be hands-on. If I feel like I get too far away, or if I'm feeling like I'm completely doing administrative stuff all day, I think I definitely get frustrated. So I think that can be the worst part, when it's kind of like 2:30 and you look at your schedule and it's just full. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you set an alarm in the morning?
Sometimes I think if I have meetings in the morning, I do. Sometimes I try to do something early, but generally I don't really set an alarm.
When you do you end up snoozing?
No, I get up right away, actually. Yeah. For some reason, I'm a very good sleeper. My partner often gets angry at me. She says it's like a superpower that if you like, she doesn't sleep well at all, and it's just like you're tired all the time. It can be really bad. Yeah.
Are you generally a planner, or do you operate more on gut feeling and go with the flow?
I'm more on the intuitive side, but I think it's a skill that you develop over time and out of necessity. I do keep a pretty regular calendar. I generally have an open calendar. My students can book time whenever they need it, and I mostly don't think. I just go to the next meeting. But I mean, I really appreciate people who can strategize and plan out their day the day before, or plan out their kind of collaborative activities. But I am not really able to do that very well.
I mean, in some sense, the once you've outsourced your meetings to a calendar, the point of doing that is that it liberates you, that in that you don't have to actively think. So I can see that.
Yeah, I love actually meeting with people. I hate planning for the meetings, so it's often that's the barrier, not the actual meetings themselves. Yeah. I've heard arguments of other forms, but I find that to be the nice way of doing it.
Yeah. For what it's worth, scheduling this with you was simple because of your public calendar. So.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, and I work part-time these days at Hugging Face, and they are a startup, obviously, and so they have very different meeting styles and meeting schedules than academia does. And so they have a pretty anti-meeting culture. And so kind of bouncing between those two worlds of like when it's okay to schedule, when it's not okay to schedule, I think is interesting. Generally, though, I do prefer the anti-meeting style to kind of just planning a regular meeting every week that's going to eat an hour of your time. Yeah.
Do you struggle with procrastination?
I do, yeah. Particularly in things like paper deadlines, I definitely find that I struggle personally, and I'm not great at having my students kind of have their drafts ready beforehand. So yeah, it's a problem. I think I'm probably like a productive procrastinator, or I lie to myself about that I like become very good at other things besides what I'm supposed to be doing towards the deadlines, for sure.
And do you struggle with time management in general?
Yeah, yeah, it's really hard. Yeah. Yep.
Are you competitive?
I think I'm relatively competitive, but I think maybe on the lower side for academia. I think that I like being competitive in a kind of fair environment. So if it's sports or like kind of people playing on a fair field, I tend to enjoy that sort of competition. I get very turned off by feeling like I need to color outside the lines or do things that don't seem right. I think I have a kind of very kind of childlike moral compass, and so whenever that happens, I just get really turned off. Yeah.
Mm. Is there a rejection or a failure that hurt particularly bad?
I certainly found grant writing to be very hard when I first started. I hadn't yet developed the resilience to just realize how good everyone else was at what they were doing. And so I took it very personally when things were rejected. I found it very helpful to actually review or sit down and very much read what my colleagues were working on, because man, people are really impressive and really know what they're doing. And like, I think a lot of that made me realize actually like I was overvaluing my own competence in some ways. It was actually helpful in some ways to put that in perspective. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a very nice it's a nice positive outlook. To treat it as a calibration signal, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
And sorry, conversely, is there a success or an achievement that felt particularly good?
Yeah, so a couple of my students who graduated last year applied for jobs and are now professors, or work in awesome roles in industry. And man, that felt good. That was so great. I just think that like, I don't know, you work with these people every day, and like as a professor, I mean, you're getting a lot of credit for work your students are really doing, and to see them really succeed and be happy on their own, man, that is a great feeling. Yeah.
So. Yeah, I know what you mean, and it like, at least for me, it taps into a sense of almost like parental pride.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. I mean, I think we're very privileged at the moment that there's a lot of hiring, there's a lot of opportunity. It doesn't feel as zero sum as I imagine it could feel in super competitive areas, but I mean, that's great. I mean, I guess take advantage while it lasts.
Yeah. What would you say is your biggest strength?
I think I work best in a one-on-one interactive setting. And I tend to be extremely loyal about my students and really anyone I'm working with. I don't know how to scale that, but I know that in the meeting when I'm there with them working on ideas, that's the kind of most effective time of the day. And I think that, yeah, I really like kind of being adversarial or being interactive or kind of just working through arguments or ideas. So I think that's really what I do most of the day.
Is there a life hack, an idea or a trick that makes your life particularly convenient in some aspect, or efficient or fun?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if this always applies, but I'm very much into prototyping. I think prototyping is really like, I don't know, I find it the most useful. So like, I'm kind of constantly putting out half-baked ideas or working hands-on on things. And I guess by prototyping, I mean more than just a thought, but actually building a minimal thing of some form. And so I think in projects, I often love tools that let you do that, things like Collab or even like Markdown, or just ways to draft ideas and so you feel like you have something tangible, or you know it's totally nonsense. So I think that's kind of what I find most useful. And I think it's because I'm a very like hands-on person in some ways. Yeah.
Makes sense. How do you make difficult decisions? Are there certain lines of thinking and frameworks that you end up employing?
Yeah, I tend to be a rash decision maker. I tend to act too early. So it's something I work on, is trying to be a little bit more cautious or have a little more conversational tone. I'm a strong believer in a book my partner once gave me called Crucial Conversations, that talks about particularly how to have very hard conversations and when that's important to do, kind of like about sitting down and explicitly forcing yourself to talk about things that are difficult or bothering you or on your mind, something like that. And I think I definitely realized I procrastinated on that a lot, like conversations I should have been having that I wasn't, that I needed to, but also trying to encourage folks to have those with me, even if it's hard for them.
Do you have an internal monologue?
That's interesting. I think I read that thread once about how some people don't. I think I don't. I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. It doesn't feel like in movies. Like where, yeah. I don't know.
So when you're thinking, you're not thinking in words, or do you talk to yourself when you're thinking?
I don't think I do. No, I don't think I have a verbal part to that in my head. No.
Interesting. Are you a visual thinker? Do you have like diagrams, pictures?
Yeah, I'm definitely a very visual thinker and teacher. I like having diagrams. I like having, kind of spatial representations. Yeah, I often try to teach on my iPad or somewhere where I can make drawings as I go.
And you find you're able to like mentally rotate and maps and like coordinate systems and things like that?
I think so. Although I was teaching a class last semester on it was basically a systems course for machine learning. So it's about the kind of internals of PyTorch and TensorFlow at a kind of like low level. I constantly had all these diagrams that I was making, and it made me realize how little I actually think about, I don't know, rotating tensors or the kind of visual structure of tensors. And I wasn't great at it. I often made mistakes in getting the dimensions wrong. So yes, I guess maybe in 2D, but not 3D, I can think. Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe that was the motivation behind named tensors.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Named tensors are explicitly geometric. Yeah.
What do you tend to think about when you're not intentionally trying to think about something? What goes on in the back burner, to the extent that you're aware of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, let's see. I think I tend not to think about work stuff too much. Think about politics or maybe a book I'm reading or an article I've just read. Sometimes I think about something I'm like working on, like if it's like a language or something like that. When I think about work stuff, I tend to fixate on problems. I'm not great at turning off, so sometimes those will stick with me. But I don't know, I try to kind of use tricks like listening to a podcast or something to turn my brain off on that when I can.
Do you struggle with turning your brain off, or do you feel that's fine, you got that under control?
For some reason, it's easier as a professor than it was as a student. Because there's so much going on, I can kind of actually context switch. And I think learning how to context switch was important. I think when I was a grad student, you're working on one thing for months at a time. You really do tend to obsess about it. I have a bit of that kind of personality. So I do obsess about problems and get intense about them. But as a professor, I think I do that less.
How do you recharge or take a break?
I think generally physical exercise or something. I play tennis, which I find really, really nice, particularly during COVID. Where I go for a run. I'll play video games, or I like to cook, things like that. But yeah, generally I try to do that once a day.
Are you happy with the number of close friends you have?
Wow, that's a good question. That's extremely intimate.
Agreed. Yes.
No, I think that as like probably many people you talk with, I work too much, and I wish I was better at scheduling. I think I wish I could like pretty regularly just schedule seeing people or being better about social things. Yeah, I think it's a really hard problem.
What are you insecure about? They just keep on coming. The hits keep on.
Yeah, that's great. What am I insecure about? I think work-wise, there are a bunch of things that have kind of come to exist in kind of modern AI and machine learning that I struggle with. Like, I'm very much not great at keeping up with all the papers that come out, and I feel like behind on certain literature or certain things. Similarly, like, I think that there is this weird thing right now with industry and academia of feeling like, oh my God, they're doing all these crazy things that it's like actually we're not able to keep up with, and some of it we are, some of it we aren't. But this kind of sense of like, I'm in theory an expert in NLP, but there are some models I couldn't build or don't understand the details of. Yeah, I think that's a little hard, because I didn't feel that way 4 or 5 years ago in some sense. Just like how quickly things are moving. Yeah.
Interesting. The loss of expertise against a fast moving landscape. That in some way that's perhaps the great unifier of our times, because I think even students may not feel the loss of expertise, but they end up also struggling with a very similar phenomena of just a deluge of papers on archive. Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you feel like an imposter in any setting, like a professional or non-work related setting?
Definitely when I first started. I think probably what ends up happening is less that you feel more secure, and more that you are more comfortable with everyone being a little bit insecure, or kind of understanding what your lane is in that way. So I think definitely less so than when I began. But as I said earlier, I certainly have that feeling in some areas. Yeah.
Do you think you're average, above average, or below average happy compared to the people around you?
I think I'm above average happy. Yeah, I feel relatively happy, particularly given how terrible things are right now. I feel like I've been able to kind of, I don't know, mostly in personal things, feel more comfortable and more together.
And does that outlook come naturally to you, or do you feel you've had to cultivate it or like work at it?
Yeah. Yeah. So personally, I think let's see. So personally, I was a professor in Boston for about 5 years, and I was really happy there professionally, but my partner really didn't like the city, and we had all sorts of issues that we were trying to figure out location-wise. And through just incredible luck, I was able to find an amazing job in New York. and I feel really privileged for that. And she's extremely happy here. I really like New York. It's made my life really nice. And I think in retrospect, I think I was really putting a lot of pressure and not totally understanding just how important it is to like be in a kind of fulfilling relationship and figure out those aspects of your life, as well as kind of work and professional interests.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What is something surprising about you? Something that the rest of us, perhaps who know you from a professional context, may not guess?
Yeah, let's see. I'm not sure I'm that surprising. One thing that comes to mind is that I think a lot of people in science come from kind of families that have some sort of STEM or technical background. My parents are both writers. My mom's a fiction writer and a journalist, and my dad is a film writer. And so I was always interested in NLP because I'm interested in language, kind of first and foremost. And the fact that I ended up working in machine learning was really like driven by the fact that I'm just super interested in writing and how writing works and language and arguments and things like that. So these days, most of my papers are pretty mathematical, but I think that was the original motivation.
Fascinating. Do you end up having family conversations about discourse and whether AI systems can ever truly understand the meaning of language?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I think in some ways, when I was young, that was always interesting to me, but writing as a profession is so interesting, and it's so much more interesting in some ways than what AI can talk about these days, that the conversation tends not to be that interesting. Like I'm not sure we have that much to say to someone who's a master of this craft. It feels like we're still at like third grade level of understanding. So I don't really aspire to do that or interact in that way. But I think my dad he's very interested in kind of questions of like how film and technology interact and how narrative in that sense would interact with, say, computer vision. So we sometimes talk about that. Yeah.
Interesting. And what is something about the world that surprises you?
The whole world? Yeah.
Not in any particular sphere that you wanted. Well, you find yourself or have found yourself in the past go, this is bizarre. Like, why is this set up this way? Or why does,
Yeah. I think that sometimes like teaching in kind of like somewhat like elite institutions seems very strange to me. Like I really don't get why college costs so much, or it like is so important that people kind of agree to go here or apply in something. Like I guess I've always like, I have a kind of open source mentality, and I've always just thought like there should be some system where if you want to take a course, you can take a course and see it. So that always felt extremely strange to me. I realize it's kind of naive, but and I realize that kind of credentialing is kind of a huge aspect of the system. But I would love to see something take off that makes it plausible to kind of get an education without paying the kind of extreme amount of money in the US.
Yeah, and it feels like we went through a little bit of phase in the early 2010s with the Coursera's of the world and the Udacities of the world, and there was a spark there that maybe that can replace or at least broaden participation. Do you see that? Like it never quite, or at least so far, it hasn't panned out to its initial ambitious sort of motivations. Do you see that world happening?
Yeah, so when I was a graduate student, I had the chance to TA a Coursera course, which is really fun. And we had like, I don't know, 50,000 people sign up for the course. Probably about 5% actually finished it or did enough of it. was neat, but it tends to be people who are extremely on top of it and like really can kind of really focus or have the time to really focus on a course that they pull through. I tend to think that maybe the model is not going to look exactly like a course, but something slightly different. I'm always impressed by people who make videos on YouTube or things like that, who try to kind of find an in for teaching material in a new way. I don't know though. I mean, it might need to be something more. I mean, people often talk about how education is not just courses; it's a whole experience and a whole kind of dedication.
What do you strongly suspect but have no proof of? This could be taken to mean what are your conspiracy theories, but in a negative light, but in a positive light, it could just be convictions that you haven't acquired or you haven't pointed to data for.
So I guess in the realm of academia, I had a graduate student once who like had conspiracy theories about who was using his like open source software, and he was very worried that I think like hedge funds were using his NLP software to, I don't even know, like predict things or trade stocks based on some signal in there. And I know that must be happening, or I know that there must be people using these tools in different ways, but I don't know how frequent that is or how that exists. And I think like the question of like, is there really someone inside a hedge fund reading random grad student papers and then stealing their code or using their code or whatever? But he had this like strategy where he would write like kind of licenses that would be like, you can use this for everything, but like, I don't know, these 4 companies are not allowed to use my thing. And I always liked that as a conspiracy theory because I thought in some sense it's kind of nice that someone's watching, even if you're particularly not using it in this way.
That's a fascinating theory. I thought where it would go is that you start putting in Easter eggs or things in the code that are pinging certain machines.
Yeah, I guess he could have done something like that, but I don't know. I think in practice, probably what it meant was that no one used his code because non-standard licenses are like really bad. But I liked how much he cared.
Okay. What is something you've changed your mind about? It could be recent or in distant past.
Yeah, I think the last couple of years have been, I think, really eye-opening in lots of ways, particularly in, I wouldn't even say change my mind, but just there's been, I mean, so many conversations about diversity in machine learning and diversity in tech generally. I feel like these are conversations I have almost daily now with colleagues, friends, reading online. And I mean, I think things are very much kind of in movement and in kind of dynamic flux. I think in a positive way. I mean, there's still so much further to go. But I find myself really just reading a lot and talking a lot and really just I don't know. I've actually found it to be a really exciting time and a really interesting time, even if not a like I don't know. I mean, a surprising amount of my day goes to these questions or conversations around these questions, and so I think I'm constantly kind of changing my mind or understanding new things in that space.
Makes sense. What is a bad habit you're working on overcoming?
Yeah, I have a bunch. My minor ones are like, I don't know, floss more, things like that. But other bad habits. Yeah, I think you definitely mentioned time management. I work a little bit on kind of anger questions or like getting frustrated and trying to be kind of productive in criticism, like really like working hard on kind of giving direct feedback, but in a kind of positive way, or in, I think it's something that, yeah, I think it's something I want to get better on or work on more explicitly.
Going back to the idea of crucial conversations, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What are you addicted to?
Yeah, let's see, I use my phone way too much. On non-work Twitter too often. I eat a lot of chocolate, which is great. Other things I'm addicted to. I don't know, I would say those are the main ones.
How do you imagine your retirement?
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be great. I don't know. I definitely fantasize about that in the winter on the East Coast.
Interesting. With all the snow.
Yeah, I think some academics don't really retire. They kind of keep on working. I don't think I want to do that. I want to kind of, I don't know, play tennis, do the crossword every day. Kind of feel like, I mean, I guess when our generation retires, we'll do all the same things we do, like, or found fun when we were young as adults. So, yeah, I think that would be nice. Yeah, I'd like to really retire.
Do you have a place or an age in mind?
Oh, I don't know. My parents basically still work and they're towards the retirement age. I don't know how standard it is to know that. I think probably I'd like to be near a city or kind of in a city for part of the year. I always find it really inspiring when you see someone at retirement age in New York City, like being awesome and dressing really cool and going to art galleries and walking up the subway. Like, people just seem to just not age, which I find really fun. So I'm always inspired by that.
Interesting. Do you think much about the future on a 5 to 10 year horizon?
I don't. I rarely think more than 5 years in advance. Developing the skill to think 5 years in advance, I think, was an interesting challenge as being a professor early on, to think about where things are going or what would we be working on, and particularly in a world that moves so quickly. It's challenging to think about, but very rarely 10 years in advance. I'm super impressed by people who can do that or like try to do that.
Onto hopefully a smaller time horizon. What would you say is your concrete prediction for when the world will open back up after COVID? Or you could narrow that down to maybe the US, so that it's at least manageable.
Man, yeah. Let's see. I'm engaged, so I'm gonna get married. And thanks. So we had to kind of think about this problem very, very intensely. So we're planning sometime around the December timeline. So I'm really hoping that a group of people can get together in December. So that would be the latest I hope the US gets together. I mean, I would love if we could, I don't know, I've heard Biden say July 4th, so that would be really exciting as well. And those are my two predictions, one of which I put a lot of money on.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, this is more than hope at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Made, like, concrete
I made a bet. It's pretty funny though. I think that planning a wedding is obviously way harder than planning, say, a giant machine learning conference. But apparently everyone has kind of gotten a little more comfortable with the idea of there being weddings again. And so just everything is like crazy booked at the moment. So it's actually like, it's been an interesting process of like everyone just deciding, hey, maybe we think the future will be better going forward.
Interesting. That's also giving you an insight into what the market believes, right? You're actually getting to know that. Yeah.
Right. Wedding dresses are about 8 months you have to buy in the future. So that's like a great futures market for COVID, is people actually betting on that. Yeah.
Fascinating. On to perhaps a significantly longer horizon. Do you think there is a point to life and our existence?
um, I, why don't I go with like axiomatically? Why not? I go about my day more often with that in mind, or hoping that's in mind. That's about all I have to add to that topic.
Yeah, I guess once you make it axiomatic, then there's not much that we can ask about it.
Yeah.
So I guess what we can ask is what flows from those axioms. Where do you find meaning, and what do you do with that axiom?
Yeah. I'm not religious, like explicitly, so I don't kind of doesn't directly impact my thinking on that front. But I generally am a relatively optimistic person, in that I assume people are relatively good on first glance, and I kind of assume, as I said earlier, kind of moral systems by default. I find that nice, and I don't know, I do that. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. I generally like to do things that people use, or I consider myself a teacher, so things that I can teach people or help people. And I don't think I do that for any particular reason, except that I just kind of believe that's how people should go about life and action. I was joking on Twitter a couple of weeks ago that I have an extremely naive sense of the world, in the sense that like I didn't understand why all the vaccines weren't just being developed in open source, or why they weren't being kind of traded between countries, or like, I know there's like huge amounts of money here, huge deals, but I kind of always assumed that if some crazy event happened, like a worldwide pandemic, then that would motivate people to kind of share science and scientific work in some ways. So I hope we can be better about those sort of things in computer science and machine learning when we can.
Yeah. It's been interesting watching. I'm sure you're aware as well that there's right now it seems like there's a bunch of countries that can afford to pay for the vaccine, in addition to the ones that may not be able to. But even the ones that can afford to pay for it are essentially locked out because of long-term contracts signed by other countries, and so it's a supply problem in the market, not the affordability problem, which is in addition to an affordability problem that may exist in some pockets.
Yeah. No, I mean it's incredibly tragic, and like. Yeah, I mean, I guess, right, I feel bad talking about December timelines when you read about like African countries that won't get supply until 2022, 2023. Yeah, it's really horrible.
What do you struggle with in life?
Yeah. I mean, I think we covered some of that earlier. One particular thing I struggled with, particularly in work, is the role kind of big tech plays in academia and in our field. I think it's, I've at various points in time worked for kind of large tech companies, and these days, I don't think I would do that again. And I'm not sure how to talk to my students about the role these companies play in our society, the role they play in aspects of our government. And I found that to be pretty challenging. I think like when you start as an academic, you kind of assume that there'll be some separation between those two worlds. And right now in machine learning, it's complicated. I mean, it's not totally clear the directionality technology development is going, or the role kind of general academia plays versus industry.
Are you generally optimistic about technology? Do you think it's the arc bends positive, or does the arc bend negative?
I mean, I find that naturally I am. I mean, I guess I've always felt that way, but without a lot of evidence, like I think I'm more and more convinced by arguments that are like actually unchecked, this arc bends negatively. And I don't actually know how to square that with the work I do personally. Like I don't know how to take that evidence and I don't know how it applies to a particular paper we're working on or something. Like you don't really know totally how technology is going to be used when you develop it. I think if I knew that the main actors were, I think, less malevolent in this space, I would feel more comfortable trying out new ideas. These days, I definitely think harder about it in some ways.
On to perhaps even more philosophical things. Pineapple topping on pizza, yay or nay?
You know, I'm philosophically opposed to it, but I do like it. I don't understand why. Like it grosses me out, but if it's there and I'm like maybe a little drunk, I will definitely eat it. So I think my theoretical and practical stance here are opposed.
Are you secretly masochistic? I think what's going on here?
I don't know. It turns out that sweet and savory actually taste good together, but I don't want to admit that. It doesn't, like, it bothers me in some way, but that's true.
I see. It's an affront to the kind of person you imagine.
Exactly. I don't want to be the kind of person who eats pineapple pizza, but it turns out maybe I am. Yeah.
Fascinating. How do you decide what to work on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I tend to actually allow my students a lot of flexibility in choosing topics. If they can convince me something is interesting, I mostly go along with that. I tend to work with students who show an opinion on this front or have interesting ideas they want to try. So I think I work best kind of as a kind of consultant or an editor or like kind of the second person on the project to push them along. So I think that's mostly how we select projects.
And how do you capture and keep track of ideas? Do you maintain lots of lists? Do you have certain other tools that are your favorite go-to?
I mean, I guess, let's see. I definitely bookmark papers. I read them on my iPad. I generally use GitHub for everything. So I have a bunch of just repos where I keep notes. I find GitHub to be a really nice tool. I use it to make my websites or projects or keep issues together. So I've really enjoyed that as a kind of academic tool. Yeah.
What are traits common to some of the best collaborators or colleagues you've worked with? What particularly stands out? What you end up remembering?
Yeah, there are two things that really stand out to me. One is I love working with experimenters. I find that to be amazing. Like if people can come to meetings with a, spreadsheet of everything they've tried, different ideas, predict the next thing that we're going to run, have a list of like what they're planning on coming up with. It's just amazing. Definitely my best collaborative experiences have been with people who are just gifted at the kind of organizational experimentation. I think it's great. I also worked once with someone who was trained as a philosopher, and I found that to be extremely fun because there's a certain kind of foundational skill in argumentation and experimentation that someone with that kind of training can put together that is kind of beyond me, and I found to be really appealing. That like I was always sure that they were going to run an experiment and they were going to get out a conclusion that made sense, that was like clear and like coherent. I just love that. Like I never felt like there was a bug in the argumentation of the story.
Yeah, I think I can relate to what you mean. There are some projects where towards the latter half of the project, you have just a smorgasbord of things that you've done and evidence that you have, and then you're trying to weave a narrative, and there are others where the narrative comes first, and then you can directly go check it. Like it's a clear hypothesis in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
And Do you think you're able to spot these traits early?
No, I guess some people can, but admissions is so challenging these days. I mean, the amount of amazing applications we get for the few amount of spots that we have, it just breaks my heart every year. And there's so many people who are qualified for these roles, and kind of figuring out what makes the difference when there really is very little difference between students applying is very challenging. And I think particularly the challenge of trying to extrapolate out from the kind of opportunities a student's been given for what they're really capable of is, I think always really challenging. And I think it's something I was never trained in, and I'm just trying to learn to do it well.
Have you come across people who are good at that, so that you can see what that training leads up to, or who's good at this?
Who's good at admissions?
Or spotting traits in people, and spotting, for example, disentangling opportunities from abilities.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm really lucky in that my my colleague Yoav Artsy, who I sit next to, is extremely good at this kind of stuff. So I have so many conversations with him. It's a good question. It's hard to know. I see professors who have really great students, but sometimes it turns out that they're like admitting a ton of people and then firing people, or that they're like have some pipeline or something. I don't know. It's very hard to know what's going on in other labs or other places.
Yeah. Describe something that made you smile today.
What made me smile today? Whatever reason today was a stressful day, to think about what actually made me smile.
How about this week?
This week, yeah, that's better. I went and got drinks outside with a friend for the first time in a really long time, which was nice.
That's nice.
It's starting to get warm here, so we can actually do that. So that was a month-long smile, I'd say.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
What is some of the best advice that you've gotten or given, or is that you would like to give to?
What's good advice generally? I think maybe for people like me who are not great at the, say, 5 to 10 year planning, the advice I often find useful is particularly let's say you're starting a new job and the kind of reward is that far down the line. It's far enough that there's really nothing you can do locally. So I found it's helpful to just kind of ignore that. And it's not, in theory, it'd be great to plan everything for that sort of time horizon, but in practice, you can build up to there by kind of being somewhat intuitive about the short term, trying to work on things that you find interesting, or for whatever reason you find, I would say, teach you new things, and not even if you don't have exactly the right plan for how they're going to lead to the kind of big thing 5 years down the line.
Interesting. And in a lot of ways, a lot of joy is derived just from the process, right? Just from the day-to-day, which can bring a lot of value in itself. Yeah.
One of my former colleagues, Radhika Nagpal, had this essay on, I think it's called the 7-year postdoc. I always found that to be really just helpful.
Yeah. It was a lovely essay. That was a really good one. Why'd you agree to do this interview with me?
Well, I'll give somewhat of an answer, which is that I think the generations of professors above me, I found to be a little difficult to know that there was a kind of culture of being a little more closed off. And I like that there's become something in social media and just the general milieu of kind of modern academia that people try to be a little bit more open and direct and social. And so while this was an extremely scary experience, I'm really trying to play into this idea that hey, that's fine. I think it's way better that people know that we're all kind of goofy and a little bit a little bit figuring it out as we go. And so it's better than the opposite of feeling like we're projecting an image of perfection or kind of solidness.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, and in some sense, thank you for getting that. It's so many of us live in this world where there are personas online, and as you said, we go about our daily lives just sort of struggling with small things every day and deriving joy in the coffee that we drink in the morning, and like I think there's value in just exposing that to people so you can just feel a bit more connected in that way. So
for sure,
that's it. Those are all the questions I had. Is there any aspect of your life that you think we didn't get to that would be worth talking about?
No, honestly, that was it. Nothing else is there. Cool.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this, Sasha. I think I really enjoyed it, and this was fun.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sorry,
Nice talking to you. Bye.